And joining us is Dr. Roger McEowen, who with Washburn University Ag Law and the Policy Specialist, the Kansas Farm Bureau chair there at the Washburn. Roger, time for yet again another Ag in the Courtroom segment, and we've got a couple of, I think, very interesting ones to talk about, and one of those is one that I think could be talked about every week, and that is noxious weeds and even the seeds of those noxious weeds.
Yeah, I would say, Ken, in terms of the issues that I deal with, of course, tax is going to be far and away the where I get the most questions and comments and requests for speaking engagements in estate planning and business planning. Then after that, I think it comes down to fence law and lease law, and shortly after that, it's weeds of all things. Whether it's a noxious weed that's listed on the state noxious weed list, or whether it's just a weed problem, it does create a lot of legal issues. And so, and that's the way I break it down. If we've got a weed that's on the state list, and as you know, the legislature modified the Kansas statute the session before this most recent session and kicked a lot more control of listing of weeds back to the counties, which is in my view, that's a great idea, because what's a weed in St. Francis, Kansas may not be a problem in Pittsburgh, Kansas, just a huge geographical distance. But we want to start with the listed weed. And from a legal standpoint, there is a responsibility of a landowner to affirmatively control weeds that are listed on the state list. And you've got to do so in a manner that is not negligent. You can't create a problem in doing that. Then we get into other issues. Well, what if the weeds are in a fence line? What if they're in a road ditch? What if they're in a rail line? Those all present their own unique legal issues.
Well, it does. And I think, with the interesting year we've had, not necessarily with all the COVID situation, but with the weather, it brought on maybe some different challenges when it comes to control, and also just where and how to control those, and whose real responsibility that is.
Yeah, the control issue is a big issue, and it doesn't matter in that instance whether we're talking noxious weeds or non-noxious, other than the fact that if it is a listed noxious weed and you as the landowner don't control it, you're ultimately responsible, even if that land is leased and the tenant has responsibility for that. If they don't, then the county is going to come out and control it, and they're going to send the bill to the landowner because it's going to get added to the property tax bill. And the tenant, for defalcating on their responsibility, they're defaulting on their responsibility, is probably going to get themselves terminated under the lease in that instance. So it's ultimately the landowner's responsibility on listed weeds to control them. But the one thing that doesn't matter whether it's listed or non-listed is if you control them, you have to do so in a manner that doesn't make the problem worse. You can't do it negligently. And I often refer people to a case a few years ago out of North Dakota where a farmer complained to his neighbor, "Hey, you got a problem in your CRP ground with kochia and Russian thistle." So he said, "Oh, I want to take care of the problem." So he does on a windy day, but he goes out and fires up his combine and combines the weeds. And of course, it scatters all over the place, causes $80,000 of damages to the neighbor in terms of his cleanup costs, reduced yields, all types of economic loss. And the court said, yeah, even though these are noxious weeds, you have a duty to control them. You can't do so negligently, or if you do, you're going to be held responsible. If they're in a fence line and you can't agree with your neighbor, call the county commissioners in Kansas. Have them come out and view that, because that's part of maintaining a fence line, which is in the purview of county commissioners. They can assign responsibility for weed cleanup that affects maintenance of the fence. And in eastern Kansas, we get into issues with vines, and that can create big problems and different issues out in western Kansas.
We're talking with Dr. Roger McEowen, kind of a ag in the courtroom with him, and we will tell you how to gain more information about these topics we're talking about. We'll be back with more in just a moment.